251ers, welcome back. Welcome back. I realized that I lied to you just a teeny bit, which I don't relish in doing, and I'm sorry that that happened. But I told you that we'd be talking about whales and dolphins today. It's not entirely accurate, but we're just about going to get there. We are going to talk about marine mammals. And then I'm going to try, there's one or two slides moved around for what I'm actually presenting to what is in your lecture, but all the slides are there. They're just in slightly different order. I realized one or two of them didn't make sense where they were. So today we're going to talk about, or now in this lecture, we're going to talk about schooling, which is something that animals swimming around in the ocean do, some of them. And we're going to talk about marine mammals, the ones that spend a lot of time on land. If that's puzzling to you, you'll find out what I mean in a few minutes. Okay, but let's start off with schooling. So schooling is when a lot of, usually it's fish, but there can also be schools of marine mammals and other types of organisms, like krill. We talked about krill. There can be schools of krill, basically. But schooling provides advantages. Schooling is when a lot of them are together, like, probably, depending on the size of the animal, hundreds to thousands to millions. Schooling provides advantages when you are trying to avoid being eaten in the open ocean. And one of the things you need to think about, so on land, unless Texas is very flat, to be quite honest. Where we are, College Station at least, is pretty flat, so there's not always a lot of places to hide, but there's usually more options for places to hide. In the open ocean, there's literally nowhere to hide, especially if you're not anywhere near the benthic. If you're out in the open ocean, right, in the photic zone, so there's light, you're way thousands of meters away from the seafloor, there's literally nowhere to hide, and so schooling is something that animals do to try to be safer in that type of environment. So there's a few things that make schooling beneficial to animals that are schooling. So in schools, the percentage of area your species covers is less, so you're harder to find. What that means is basically if you have 100 animals and they're spread out all over the place, it might be more easy to find one of those animals, whereas if you have 100 animals and they're all together, they occupy a smaller space in the environment, so it's harder to find them. The flip side to that, that's one of the arguments people give for schooling. The flip side to that is if they are found, that could be really devastating to your population if a lot of you get eaten. So I think there's two sides to that sword, but that's one of the arguments. I think more probably obviously beneficial is if you watch a school, the continuous changing of direction can confuse predators. I put a video of schooling up in the folder for chapter 14, so you could see some video footage from above of a really big school, pretty close to the shore. But you can see how they move around really quickly, right? And so that moving around all the time, which they can do because of their lateral line systems, that confuses predators, makes it harder to find the animals. And again, then it's hard to find them, and they're all together, so they're occupying less space. So, and then finally, there's safety in numbers. So most of the time, as you'll see in the picture on the next slide, there's some dolphins going after a school of fish. Some of those fish surely are going to be eaten, but as a whole, if you think about ecology, think about evolution, think about what organisms are trying to do, organisms generally trying to preserve themselves, but more importantly, they're trying to preserve the species. And I have infinitely greater respect for organisms or individuals, humans in particular, but also animals that do more to preserve a pack or a group or the species than they do to preserve themselves. And that's why dogs are better than cats. There's an awesome episode of Nature about dogs talking a lot about that show Nature. This is the most recent episode of Nature that I've seen about dogs somewhere in Africa, in some grassland area, and how they survive with lions. And the dogs, they're awesome. They're awesome, way cooler than lions. Anyway, so there's safety in numbers, right? you're gonna, as a whole, your species is gonna get out. Even your school is gonna probably do okay, but some of you may not make it. So here's that picture. You can see in this picture, there's, thousands of fish here. I don't know what those are. They look like they could be herrings or anchovies. They're, little fish making these dolphins really happy. These dolphins can't, well, I don't know if they can't, probably are not going to eat the entire school, which means that some of those fish are going to be okay. What the dolphins actually will probably try to do is swim up into it to disrupt the school, and then they eat stragglers on the outside. But again, safety in numbers. So you should know that by definition, within a school, individuals move together and are evenly spaced, and they can do this because of the lateral line system. They're not reacting to each other, next to each other. They move as a group. I mean, maybe they're reacting to each other, but they're not consciously. They just move as a group. They can do this because of their lateral line system. Lateral line system basically, so the inside of your ears, there's a lot of little hairs, and when sound waves pass by them, the hairs move, and we interpret that as sound, and that's how we hear. If you didn't know that, now you know that's how you hear. By the way, hey, 251ers. When you go to a concert, or you go to anything that's very loud, I used to be in a band, and I played way too many shows. My hearing's not what it used to be. When you come out of that concert, and I used to wear earplugs all the time too, but when you come out of that concert, or whatever loud thing you went to, if your ears are ringing, here's a fun fact for you. If your ears are ringing, what you are hearing, that ringing sound, is actually the death throes of the hairs in your ears that will die and be permanently dead, and you never recover that tiny little fraction of your hearing. Fun fact. So they're sending off random signals as they're dying. How does that relate to the lateral line system, Professor Sylvan, you might ask? The way that relates to the lateral line system is that if you remember the picture of the fish, it's like a bunch of dots, but actually inside of those dots are hairs. And so in a similar manner, there's little hairs that are sensing motion in the environment, and so they could subconsciously, they're feeling the whole school moving around them, and so they all move together in a group, and that's why they could move. If you watch the video, it's really pretty amazing. You just see these groups of way bigger than that, of probably millions of fish just kind of whoosh, 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 moving all together as one. Oh, by the way, I also posted a video about deep sea fish that I didn't mention in the last lecture, but I should have mentioned. And I also posted a few videos about whales that will go with the last lecture. So you should check them out. They're all in the folder with these videos. So if you if you're watching this video, you've probably noticed that they're down there, but just in case you haven't, that's what those are. So that's basically, that is schooling. That's why you do this for protection. You can do this because you have a lateral line system, which means most often these are being done by fish. Even though I mentioned there are, I guess I don't know if it's called schooling. You would find pods of dolphins. And as you'll find out, baleen whales tend to be solitary, so they don't have pods. And sharks also tend to be solitary, so it's mostly fish, but there are huge groups of things like krill and stuff like that. I guess they don't move in the same way. So let's just say, I take it back. Let's just say schooling is something that fish do, and that's because they have a lateral line system and they move together, and basically that's their way. The reason that they're doing this, that's their way of protecting themselves in an environment where there's nowhere to hide, just like space. If you haven't seen Alien or Aliens, whew, you are missing in space. No one can hear you scream. That's the tagline. Not there's nowhere to hide, but I got my lines confused. I'm old. Okay. Let's bring on the fun stuff. This has already been fun, but the more fun mammal-like stuff. So nectin, as we mentioned, are animals that live in the ocean and swim around of their own free will, quicker than the currents, and therefore control their fate as far as it goes swimming in the ocean. So marine mammals are more or less hairy nectin. Why do I say that? Because if you want to be a mammal, you have to have hair at some point in your life. So marine mammals, by definition, because they are mammals, these are all definitions for mammals, you must be warm-blooded, right? That's not an option. You have to be warm-blooded. That means that you can regulate your temperature. to some extent, which actually is really important in the ocean, where water is a really good, it has a high specific heat, so it maintains, it's a really good insulator, so cold water feels really cold. You must breathe air if you're a marine mammal. That's the challenge of being a mammal in the ocean. You have to be coming to the surface fairly often. You have to have hair during at least one stage of development. So if you look at most whales and dolphins, they don't necessarily have hair as we see them now, but they do in their development fetal stages. You must bear live young. Just because you bear live young does not make you a mammal. Some sharks bear live young. As a matter of fact, we already know that sharks are badass, right? But did you know this? This is like the fun facts chapter for you. Some sharks have multiple fetuses, feti, I don't know what the word is, but they have multiple developing fetuses in their uterus. The ladies do. And maybe like, not 10 or 20, but maybe like 2, 3, 4, right? So they have multiple eggs are fertilized, so they have these little baby sharks around in there, but they only give birth to one. And the reason for that is because the one that eats the other ones is the one that wins and gets born, and then they're born knowing how to hunt, because they've already been hunting inside of the womb. How crazy and badass is that? And that's why they come out just perfect killing machines. So sharks bear live young, but they're not mammals because they don't breathe air and they don't have hair. So, and finally, if you want to be a mammal, and a marine mammal included, females must make milk for their young, and so this is something that all of the marine mammals do. They nurse their young. Right? As opposed to the shark, whose sole mothering, I forget what species does this, it's not all species, but their sole mothering is that they basically provide a house for their fetuses to become mini cannibalistic killers, and then they say, all right, out into the world with you, and then they don't see them again. Mammals tend to care for their young for some period of time. Okay, so marine mammals, I'm back, I walked off screen, but I'm back. Marine mammals, there are 3 orders. Remember, domain, so these are all eukaryotes, domain. Kingdom is the animals. Phylum, I actually forget what the phylum is. And then class is mammalia, and then there's 3 orders within that class. You don't have to know species names or any of that. I do want you to know that there are 3 orders, and I want you to know the families or some of the common names, and I'll point out the ones that I want you to know within those orders. So we have the carnivora, which includes otters, bears, and pinnipeds. You can find out what pinnipeds are if you don't know what that is. These are the ones that live on land, but spend a lot of their time in the water, and so they're considered marine animals, marine mammals, well, both marine animals that happen to be mammals. Remember, carnivores, this is basically carnivores. This includes a whole slew of other mammals like wolves and things like that. So not just these 3 groups. However, out of the marine mammals, these are the only 3 carnivora: sea otter, polar bear, pinnipeds. The Sirenia, which includes the manatees and the dugong. If you don't know what a dugong is, you're going to find out. And the cetacea, which includes the whales, and that's what we're going to talk about in the next lecture. So remember, carnivora, Sirenia, cetacea. Okay, let's start with the carnivores. Sea otters, these cute little guys. Oh my word, they are adorable. They are adorable. Sea otters, oh, it even says right there that they're adorable. They are adorable. They move around a lot to stay warm because they don't have blubber. So they need to swim around a lot. Sea otters, some other fun facts. I mentioned last chapter, sea otters are really important in that ecosystem where sea otters eat sea urchins, right? Those are little balls with spikes that walk along the seafloor. Sea urchins basically eat the bottom off of kelp and kill the kelp because the bottom keeps them at the bottom. If you don't keep them at the bottom, they float away. Those leaves are buoyant. That's why kelp forests go up towards the light. And so if they do that, they can actually decimate a kelp forest. And so sea otters keep the sea urchins in check, which allows for healthy kelp forests, which allows for an entire ecosystem to live there. So sea otters are really important when they were hunted for their fur. Their numbers went down. Sea urchin numbers went up, and kelp forests did not do well. But we said, hey, that's a super jerk thing to do. We're going to stop doing that, so we don't hunt them for their fur anymore, and they've rebounded. See, there is good news. We released that pressure on them, and they rebounded healthily. And so now there's a lot of sea otters, there's less sea urchins, and there's healthy kelp forests. There's still sea urchins out there. They serve a purpose too, but it's called a trophic cascade. They basically took over. They did more than they were supposed to do. Sea otters also, come on, they're so cute. Sea otters use tools. So this particular otter is floating on its back because it's hanging out with its little baby, which is super duper cute and adorable. But also, they have like six-pack abs, and they take rocks and they smash open clams and mussels on their belly, and then they eat them. So they use tools to eat their food. So they're really smart little critters. There's also included in the carnivora are polar bears. These guys. Look, they're adorable. Oh, but they will mess you up and they will eat you. They are really, really good predators. Do not approach them. If you're ever where they live, which is only in the Arctic, not in the Antarctic, that's why polar bears do not eat penguins, because penguins are only in the Antarctic. Polar bears are only in the Arctic, north, right? They have them in Alaska. They have them in the upper reaches of Canada. They don't have a lot of food up there. I don't know if you knew this, but there's not a lot of stuff living up there. So if you're up there, they will follow you around and try to eat you. Take it from me. I know people who do research up there, and you have to get training, polar bear shooting training, to be able to do work in certain areas of the Arctic simply because they're a threat to your life. We don't want to kill them. But if it's you versus the bear, then unfortunately that's what you have to do. I don't know any scientists who have had to do that, by the way, but you have to either be trained yourself or take somebody who can shoot them if that becomes an issue. I have anecdotally heard stories that they will cover their noses when tracking humans so that you can't see them because they're white and the snow is white. The only thing that's not white on them is their nose and their eyes. That is vicious. So here's cute polar bears. They're of course also the adorable, heartstring pulling poster children of climate change, and we'll talk about that in chapter 16, why that is. But for now, you should know they live in the Arctic. Because of climate change and reducing the amounts of food that they usually have access to, this is a picture of something that hadn't happened previously, and it's a polar bear eating a dolphin, another marine mammal. This dolphin stuck its head up in the wrong place. I don't actually know if the polar bear killed it or if it found a carcass. I'm guessing it probably did something to it. They had to come up for air eventually, right? And so this was the first time this had been witnessed, and this is clearly a sign of climate change because they're running out of the food that they usually eat because they usually search for food underneath the ice. In thin parts of the ice, there's now less ice because of climate change, so they're having to find other food to eat. So polar bears, they are really cute, but they are also efficient and dangerous predators. So in the third group that I mentioned are the pinnipeds. So if you didn't know what those are, now you know what they are. They include the walruses and the seals and the sea lions. So let's start with the walruses. Walruses are also found only in the Arctic. They are known for males having these tusks. I think it's just the males. And being shamelessly fat. Look at them. Look at them. This guy does not care that I know that he is fat. He likes it. He thinks it's awesome. That's because it's really cold where they live and they need blubber. Polar bears also aren't quite as shamelessly fat, but they like to have a nice layer of blubber. This is what keeps them warm, and remember, that's why sea otters have to keep moving so much so that they don't freeze. Walruses are a protected species. Only Native Americans that live in the Arctic areas are allowed to hunt them. So if you ever go up there, do not hunt them. You're not allowed to do that unless you are a Native American from the Arctic. So, and then finally we have, finally amongst the carnivora, we have the pinnipeds. I'm sorry, we were already talking about the pinnipeds. We have the sea lions and fur seals, which are part of the pinnipeds. Seals, harbor seals, amongst others. Earless seals, these are the smaller of the bunch between harbor seals and fur seals, also much smaller than sea lions. They have a smaller foreflipper and no ear flaps, and they don't walk. They don't walk like fur seals, which kind of walk on their legs, hop around, and do cute tricks at the aquarium. You're less likely to find a harbor seal at the aquarium because they're cute in their own way, but they're not going to do tricks. They just kind of slither along. They're not going to be able to stand on their back flippers. Sea lions can bend, and part of it is because they can't bend their hind legs underneath them, like that, or that. Sea lions can. They can bend their hind legs underneath them, making them mobile on land. They have ear flaps and large foreflippers. By ear flaps, I mean basically things sticking out from their heads. This thing has, it just looks like a hole in its head. This thing has, and they have things. These animals both have what looks like ears. This sea lion, I took that picture in New Zealand about a minute, let's say less than a minute, before he started chasing after me. And I was walking up a hill, and he was mad, and he's like, "Stop taking pictures of me!" And he chased after me. It was big. It was a big boy. Well, probably why he chased after me is they told us when we went down to the beach that never to walk between the ocean and a sea lion. But what happens when the sea lion has walked so far off the beach that to get off of the beach you have to walk in front of it? That's what happened. And he was just sitting there for a while, and so I took a few pictures. But as I finished taking pictures and started basically walking up the hill to the parking spot, he chased after me. He didn't get me. They can't climb hills that quickly. But anyway, those are sea lions. So obviously they're much more mobile than these tickers, because this guy was a good 200 yards up the beach. Well onto the berm, well past where you would normally find water. So, and then finally we have fur seals. Fur seals look like earless seals. These guys. They look like the seals, but they are mobile like sea lions, and they have ear flaps. And large foreflippers. These foreflippers are much bigger than on the, I guess, true seals are called. So these are eared seals. These are the ones you're much more likely to find in the aquarium because they can do tricks and stuff. So in the last group we're going to talk about today are the Sirenia. So if you didn't know what these are, well, I kind of mentioned in the beginning, they're the manatees and the dugongs. Manatees, hopefully you know what they are. Dugongs look kind of like manatees, but they live in the Pacific. All of these animals, both manatees and dugongs, these are the only two groups. I forget if there's more than one species of them. There might be more than one species of manatee. I'm not actually sure about that. I don't think there is, actually. Sorry, I think there's only one species of manatee and one species of dugong, although there are extinct prehistoric versions of these. Actually, there may even be extinct versions that survived long enough until we killed them off at some point in the past, not recently. They're exclusively herbivores. They eat shallow water grasses, so they have a special place in my heart. We call them sea cows because they basically are sea cows. They're giant, slow-moving mammals that eat grass. They're about 3,000 pounds. Come on, that's ridiculous. Both of these are endangered species, largely, not really because of hunting, by the way. The dugongs, they have suffered some hunting pressure, but the manatees, not really. They're endangered species largely from boat injuries, because they're slow-moving, coastal, and they have to come to the surface to breathe. And so they get hit by boats a lot. So they have propeller injuries, right? And you know, people can do some pretty awful stuff, but I'm going to go out on a ledge here and say that generally these are accidents. These are not people being jerks trying to kill manatees. Usually people like manatees, but they're just, it's kind of an unfortunate circumstance of their lifestyle and the fact that people like being in the water in coastal areas. So if you're boating, we have these in the Gulf of Mexico. I don't know if we have them in Texas waters, but we have them for sure in Florida. And actually on the East Coast as well, as far north as Chesapeake Bay. If you're boating in coastal areas, just look out for them. They like warm water. And then their counterpart in the Pacific Ocean and the Indian Ocean are called dugongs. So you see what a manatee looks like. They have, note here, they have big round tails, big fat foreflippers, and their faces, they look like dogs. They're very cute. They look like bulldogs almost. And dugongs, you'll see in the next picture, they have almost what looks like a mustache. They kind of have a thing feature in their face, their front lips, and their tails look more like dolphin tails. There you go. So this is, you could spend more time with this if you want, but this is image from the United Nations Environmental P, whatever P is. And some other groups. And it says, what are the differences between a dugong and a manatee? And so you can see here, largely, the tail of a dugong is a fluke-like, similar to a dolphin tail, but the manatee tail is paddle-shaped. I mentioned that. It's round. Dugongs live in the Indian and Pacific Oceans. Manatees live in the Atlantic. Dugongs have a smooth skin. No wrinkles. Manatees are a little more wrinkled, especially in the fat neck, shamelessly fat face area. And dugongs are a little bit smaller. Dugongs, adult, weighs about 250 to 400 kilograms, up to about 1,000 pounds. Manatee weighs 400 to 500 kilograms. Where I got 1360, that's probably the biggest ones. And dugongs can't live in fresh water where manatees can. They migrate in between. So there's a few other little differences here, but those are the big ones. Basically, these are the manatees of the Pacific and Indian Ocean. They're a little bit smaller and their tails are different. They serve the same ecological purpose. They eat seagrasses, and they actually really help those ecosystems. In a more advanced class that I teach about biological oceanography, we talk about them and how in areas where in the Pacific or the Indian Ocean, in areas where they are not found as frequently, that those seagrass systems are less healthy than in areas where they are. So they really help regulate those systems. So 251ers, ta-da! That is the end of this lecture. Next lecture, it might be two if I ramble as much as I have been rambling lately. Next lecture, we are talking about whales. And I'm really psyched, and I'm going to see you there. And I'm going to run off screen this way. Turn it off, George.